All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the BioBelly podcast, where we dive deep into gut health, wellness, and what it takes to really feel good from the inside out. I'm your host, Trishy, and this is our first and very first episode. I am so honored to have our incredible guest, Miss Joanna Baker. She's joining us all the way from Melbourne, Australia, sharing her precious time with us. She's an accredited practicing dietitian and registered nurse who specializes in IBS and food intolerances. And her journey is deeply personal because she has lived with IBS for decades and she has turned her own struggles into a passion and a profession, helping others find that freedom and relief through the right support and education. So today, we're going to talk about her story, about what IBS really is, and her tips and tactics on helping us take those strides towards living a life of optimized health and of freedom. And she's hopefully also going to tell us about her work day to day with everyday nutrition and the Fast Freedom program and how she can help us more personally live better and more comfortable lives. So, Joanna, again, thank you so much for spending your time here. I would love if you can share a little bit about yourself and your personal journey with IBS.
Hi, Trishi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. A little bit about me. So I was only about 12 months old when my mother first took me to the doctor and said there's something wrong with this child's gut. And look, this is back, I'm aging myself here. This is back in the 70s where there was no low FODMAP diet. There was no, we didn't know anything about IBS. Well, we didn't know much about IBS really. And the doctor just said to her, oh, look, take her off milk. She's a gutty baby. She'll grow out of it. Well, I didn't really grow out of it. So I sort of spent the majority of my formative years avoiding milk because I knew I didn't do well with it. And then, so my gut it bothered me on and off, but it was mostly kind of well managed as long as I didn't drink milk. I was pretty good. I got through teenagehood. I grew into a gutty teenager. I grew into a gutty adult. Finished school, and then I did a nursing degree. So I spent the first half of dietetics as my second career, spent the first half of my working life as a registered nurse, mostly working in operating theatres. So I was an anesthetic and recovery nurse, so putting people to sleep, monitoring them while they're asleep, and then waking them up and making sure they're awake and not in pain and send them back to the ward. And that was my life, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the technical side of what we were doing. I used to come home from work some days and just say, oh my God, what science and medicine are capable of just used to blow me away. It was awesome. Then in my early 30s, I had a baby and took a year of maternity leave because in Australia we get 12 months maternity leave. And I went back after a year and my whole life had changed. You know, I had this new baby, all my perspectives and opinions, like everything changed. And I went back to work and it was the same people doing the same things. And I'm sort of thinking, well, I really like this, but is this what my life is going to be for the next 30 years before I retire? And I got a little bit disillusioned by it. And I sort of started thinking, well, we're doing these operations, but some of these operations could have actually been avoided if we had done other interventions beforehand. So we could people that were coming in for toe amputations because of diabetes, you know, if we've managed their diabetes beforehand, we can avoid doing toe amputations. So that was when I started thinking, well, what do I want to do with my life? So I ended up thinking, well, I've always loved nutrition and I've always loved health and science, and dietetics was really a really good crossover. So that was when I went and enrolled in my master's degree of dietetics and decided to be a dietitian. During my training, so I ended up doing my master's degree. I finished it when my son was in his first year of school. So during my training, I started learning a bit more about IBS and a bit more about gut health and those things. And I started sort of thinking, this really sounds like me. You know, what's going, like all people, I just need to avoid milk and I'm okay. And then I started thinking, hang on, there might be something else going on here. And part of me sort of thought, well, if I'm going to be a dietitian, I'm going to be changing people's diets. Perhaps I should know what it's like to change your diet myself. So I threw a whole lot of diets into a hash, and I just sort of picked one out of the hash and thought, well, I'll give that a go for a week, and I'll see what it's actually like to do this. And I ended up pulling out a low FODMAP diet. So I thought, okay, all right, we'll give this a go. So I started following a low FODMAP diet. And within 3 days, I was totally blown away of how much I have been bloated my whole life. And within 3 days, all of a sudden, I wasn't bloated. And I had thought it was normal. I thought everybody was bloated by 2:00 in the afternoon, and to sort of find out that actually that's not normal and not everybody's walking around and doing their pants by 2:00 in the afternoon, that blew me away. So the first thing I did is go to the doctor and say, hey, there's something weird going on here, and sort of went through all of that. So that's kind of started my journey into, I guess, nutrition and IBS, and realizing that the difference between being full and being bloated, that they weren't actually the same thing, was a real eye-opener for me. So that was back in 2015. So 10 years ago now. Once I graduated with my dietetics degree, I'd been working in a hospital by that stage for 20 years. I'd had enough of hospitals. I didn't want to go back and be a dietitian in the hospital. So I went straight into private practice. And what I wanted to do was work with people who had IBS, because I had realized by that stage, I knew how hard it was to live like that and have to manage it. But I also knew that you didn't have to live like that, and what a difference nutrition could make. So I started specializing in IBS, started seeing people with gut issues. I actually was contacted by FODMAP Friendly fairly early on, and I worked part-time for them in FODMAP testing for a couple of years. Learned a lot about FODMAPs, a lot about IBS along that path. And then I guess like the last 10 years, I've just been working with people. I do IBS. I'm working with people on low FODMAP diets. I'm doing food sensitivities like milk protein intolerances, non-celiac wheat sensitivity. I do celiac disease. I do IBD. I do histamine sensitivities, I think you guys call them in the US. Here in Australia, we call them natural food chemical sensitivities. I'm also sort of dabbling a little bit into the women's health side of things, because there's a really high correlation. Certainly 2/3 of people that have IBS are female. But also there's some relationship between IBS and things like endometriosis. And I'm also seeing a relationship between IBS and things like perimenopause and those sorts of sort of hormonal changes in women's life as well. So I'm doing a little bit in that area lately. And I'm really loving it and really enjoying it. Just, I love seeing people I'm working with, how far they come and what sort of results they're getting really quickly, and how they're able to then go back and live their life. And sort of they come into me, some people with a list of sort of 5 or 6 foods that they think are their trusted food list. And then to be able to sort of turn that around and add food back into their diet, and just see them get more variety and more freedom with food, but also in doing it in a way that their symptoms are really well managed as well. And they start to feel like they're in control of their gut again, instead of their gut controlling them. And they're able to go out to dinner and eat with friends and travel and start actually living their lives again. It's such a rewarding area to work in. So I could talk for hours about it, but it's amazing. I work through a bit of what you would call a weight neutral lens. So I don't see people for things like intentional weight loss. And we believe that people come in all shapes and sizes, and that's okay. Our goal is to help you improve your energy levels, help you feeling better, and having that weight settle where it settles. So we're certainly not going to be, we don't judge someone's health based on what they look like. So
I so love that, Joanna, because I feel like that's so much better for long-term wellness. I feel like we always, maybe it's just what society conveys to us, but there's always this small narrative of being looking aesthetically pleasing. But I think the narrative that you are kind of bringing more into the center is this idea of feeling good in your body, having that perspective of long-term wellness and freedom. I am so about that.
Absolutely.
It's actually interesting because my mom, she is right now, she's in her later
Mm.
40s. And I also feel like there are times where she feels like, because I'm her fitness coach. I actually train her after work when she's a lawyer. So when she comes home, it is my job for 30 minutes. I train my mama. And one thing she loves to tell me is, Trishy, I need to lose weight right here. Or I need to lose this.
Yeah.
You have to help me do something. And I tell her, Mama, it's not like this like zone.
Right.
You can't like just burn
Yeah.
fat in one area. It's like overall. It's like what do you and I have to talk to her about strengthening her
Yes.
joints, getting
Yes.
flexible, getting
Yes.
stronger. But what sometimes her temptation is no. I just want to look aesthetically good, which is something that we all I think a
Yeah.
bit deal with. But just again, reinforcing that thing of just feeling good in your
Yes.
skin, I think that
That's
brings so much peace.
you can't judge somebody's health by looking at them, and skinny doesn't mean healthy. It's hard when we live in a world that prioritizes thinness above health, that underneath it's health that's going to travel with you through your life, and that strength is so important for healthy aging. And you know what? Our bodies are supposed to, life is a journey, and our bodies are supposed to change as we travel through life. And when you're in your
Right.
40s or in your 50s, you're not going to look the same as you did in your 20s. And your body's doing what it's designed to do, and it will change, and that's okay. Our job is to navigate those changes, not try and not have those changes. I mean, aging is a
Absolutely.
blessing. I was talking to a friend at the gym the other day. Not everybody gets to be our age, you know? We're the lucky ones
No.
if we're aging.
That
So,
is so true. That is so true. There is definitely a beauty in it. In fact, I feel like the happiest person I know is my grandma. She is the happiest. She wakes up, she does her yoga, she does all her, small body hacks. And, it just seeing her taking her time in life, I feel if I'm even half that, in 50, 60 years down the line, I'm a happy guy. So,
absolutely. Happiness comes from within.
right. Absolutely. Happiness comes from within. Moving on though,
Yes.
Joanna, exactly this problem of IBS.
Yes.
If you could just teach us what exactly is IBS in terms that what happens in our gut
Mhm.
to start that small snowball of negative
Mhm.
effects, slowly, taking control of out of our hands.
Mhm.
And in terms of our diet, in terms of what we can eat, what we react to, what exactly is IBS in terms of what's happening in our body, in our gut?
Yeah, absolutely. So IBS is classified as a disorder of gut-brain interaction. So what that means is that to be diagnosed with IBS, the gut is essentially healthy. So if somebody has got symptoms, they need to go along to their doctor. Their doctor will run a few blood tests and screen them, ask them a few screening questions, perhaps depending on the results of those screening questions, decide if there's further investigations needed. Essentially with IBS, usually those tests will all come back normal. So it means that you have got symptoms and we don't have a medical reason for having those symptoms. So what's actually going on with IBS is that we've got a whole lot of nerves that are in and around our intestines, and their job is to collect information about what's going on in our inside world. And they communicate that information to the brain up the gut-brain axis. It's the brain's job to interpret that information, and then the brain sends instructions back to the gut of how fast to go, how slow to go, and how sensitive it should be. Now, it's believed with IBS that those nerves in the gut are more sensitive than somebody who doesn't have IBS. So they're collecting more information about digestion than somebody who doesn't have IBS, and they're over communicating that information with the brain. In the process, some of those messages are getting scrambled as they go up and down the gut-brain axis as well. And I kind of think of it like the gut is speaking English and the brain is speaking French, and they're sort of not really understanding each other. And the brain thinks because of that, there is something dangerous going on in the gut. And when the brain thinks that there is something dangerous happening, your brain's number one priority above all else is to protect you from danger. So if it thinks there's a problem going down there, it's going to send messages back to the gut that are going to get your attention. because it wants you to change to protect yourself from danger. So it will send messages to increase the sensitivity of those nerves. It'll send pain messages. It'll speed things up. It'll slow things down, because your body doesn't talk to you with words. Your body talks to you with actions and feelings and emotions and sensations. And that's your body's language. And that's how it's trying to say to you, hey, I think there's something wrong down there. Whereas we know from the testing that there's actually not something wrong down there, but it's that miscommunication and that oversensitivity. Now, the thing about the oversensitivity is there's a few things that can trigger that, or that can be involved in that. So we certainly know that when people get a bad bout of gastro, that can irritate the nerves around the gut while you've got the gastro. And the thing about our nervous system is that it's not hardwired like the electrics in a house. Nerves grow and they learn and they evolve. So if you irritate those nerves with a bout of gastro, they then start over collecting information and they send messages to the brain. The brain says, hey, I'm worried about that, and sends messages back. And then the nerves say, hey, well, the brain's worried about it too. We were right to be concerned about it. So we're going to keep collecting information. And we end up with this sort of positive reinforcement cycle. So we get what might be called post-infectious IBS. So you develop IBS after an infection because the nerves have learned to behave like that. I also think there's a really nice example when we look at things like FODMAP. So I'm assuming that most people have heard about the FODMAP diet by now. Mm-hmm. If they haven't, we can talk about that. The thing about FODMAPs is that they go in one end, they pass through, and they come out the other end. And as they're going through the intestines, the large intestine in particular, they get fermented by the gut microbiome. So the bacteria that live in the intestines will ferment the FODMAPs, and that will create gas as a side effect. Now we know FODMAPs like onion, garlic, and wheat, these are FODMAPs for all human beings. There is no human that can digest those fully. So in everybody, they're going to be poorly digested. It's not just in people with IBS. And in everybody, they're going to increase the amount of gas in the intestines. Now, that gas stretches the walls of the intestines and it pushes on those nerve endings. So whether that gas production causes problems for you or not is all to do with how sensitive those nerve endings are around your gut. And there was a study that they did, I think it was 2 years ago now, where they got two groups of people. They had one group that were medically diagnosed with IBS and one group who were the healthy controls. So they didn't have any gut problems at all. And they got them to come into the hospital on 3 separate occasions, and they gave them infusions of glucose into their stomach on one occasion. On another occasion, they gave them saline, so salty water, into their stomach. And on the third occasion, they gave them an infusion of fructans. Fructans are the FODMAP that's in onion, garlic, and wheat. Okay. And during this, they did MRIs of their stomach and they did MRIs of their brain. And what they found is when they gave the fructan infusions, both groups had increased gas production in their intestines, and there was no difference between the groups. So both groups had the same amount of gas in their intestines. But the people with IBS, the pain centers in their brain lit up, whereas the people who didn't have IBS, the pain center in their brain did not light up. So that tells us it's that gut-brain interaction is what's going on here rather than anything else. And that's why the FODMAPs then can become problematic if you've got increased nerve sensitivity in the gut.
Wow, that makes so much sense. And
doesn't it?
I think that sheds a lot, right? Yeah, because it sheds a light on the role of these nerves. And simply the only variable between those 3 people was how sensitive, of course, beyond the food they had, but in terms of their microbiome, the only difference between those 3 people was how sensitive their nerves were. And if they were to had any food, the gas would have been the same, but it's just because of the sensitivity of those nerves. Absolutely. That's what made the effect as worse as it was. Yes. That's what made the bloating and that makes a lot of sense. And if you could share, when we talk about low FODMAP, I see we did mention fructans, but what exactly is FODMAPs, like in terms like what I believe it's an acronym.
Yes.
And I do remember you talking about how, though it is powerful, essentially it is a short-term tool to improve IBS. Yes. I was wondering if you can share a little bit about, one, what is FODMAPs and what's then the long-term solution we should be thinking about?
Yep. So you're correct. FODMAP is an acronym. I don't think it's important for everybody to remember what the acronym is. So the F stands for fermentable, and then we've got oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. They're just the scientific names for some different types of sugars that can turn up in some of our food supply. So FODMAPs are types of sugars or carbohydrates that are poorly digested. So when we eat our food, it goes in through the mouth, down through the esophagus into the stomach. The stomach is essentially a giant blender. It mixes everything into a smoothie type mixture. And then it slowly releases that mixture into the small intestine. Now, when that smoothie mixture is in the small intestine, that's where the body starts extracting all the bits that it wants or it needs to use. So the carbohydrates, the proteins, the vitamins, the minerals, it will pull them out of the intestines and into the bloodstream so that the body can use them. Now, what doesn't get extracted stays in the intestine. So it travels through the small intestine and into the large intestine. And in the large intestine, this is where FODMAPs have their impact. So FODMAPs don't get digested, they continue through. And in the large intestine, that's where your gut microbiome is. And that bacteria, that's a live bacteria, it needs food to stay alive. And what it loves to feed on is FODMAPs. So when the FODMAPs arrive in the intestines, the gut bacteria start feeding, they create gas as a side effect. And this is actually a good thing because the gas that is created from digesting the FODMAPs and things like onion and garlic and wheat, this is short-chain fatty acids. And those short-chain fatty acids are really important for managing the pH of your intestines. And they actually do things like reduce inflammation in the body. They prevent bowel cancer. And they've got a lot of really beneficial health effects. The thing is, that gas creation, like I said, it can stretch the walls of the intestines and it can push on the nerve endings. And if you've got sensitive nerves, they can start responding to that stretching. So we want people to be eating FODMAPs for their gut health and for their long-term health and well-being. But at the same time, we don't want people to be in pain because the thing about FODMAPs is they cause bloating. The other thing FODMAPs do in the large intestines is they draw water in. So they're quite osmotic and they pull water into the intestines to water them down. And there's only one way for that water to go. So, and that's straight down the toilet. So with FODMAPs, we've got things like bloating, cramping from the stretching of the intestines, diarrhea, those sorts of things. So we want people to feed their gut microbiome, but we don't want them to be in pain. So what do we do about that? So the low FODMAP diet, it was first published in research in around about 2006, I think it was, by Monash University here in Melbourne. And what they found is that by limiting the FODMAPs in people's diet, around 75% of people report a significant improvement in things like bloating and cramping and diarrhea. So that sort of tells us that 3 out of 4 people with IBS, if we produce less gas in their intestines, those nerves don't get stimulated as much and they're a lot more comfortable. Now, because they're such healthy foods, we want people to start bringing them back into their diet. So what the low FODMAP diet is designed is a 2 to 4 week phase 1, and that's where we remove all of the FODMAPs to see if you are one of the people that the diet works for or not. Because remember I said it only works for about 75% of people. So the odds are good, but it doesn't work for everyone. And that first sort of 2 to 6 weeks, we want to know, does lowering the FODMAPs in your diet actually improve your symptoms or not? If it does, brilliant, we know we're on the right track. So then we do a reintroduction process where we reintroduce each of the FODMAP groups, because there's 4 types of FODMAP main groups, and then there's a couple of subgroups as well. So we do reintroductions 1 FODMAP at a time. There's 8 baseline reintroductions that we do to see how you react to that individual FODMAP. So that's a bit of an N=1 study on your body. And we find on average that people will react to about 2.5 FODMAP groups. And when I say react, I always think of it's a spectrum. So most people will find a small amount is okay. And then a larger amount might be a bit of a tickle, and then an even larger amount might become more painful. So we're sort of working out, first of all, is this FODMAP something that irritates your gut nerves? Or can you have a little bit of it or not? And where is your threshold for that FODMAP? Because we know that the best diet for anyone is the most liberal diet possible. And if you're only going to have 2 FODMAP groups that bother you, there's no point in limiting the ones that don't bother you. And the only way to know that is that reintroduction process. So once we've been through that and we found out, okay, this FODMAP you have this threshold for, this FODMAP you have that threshold for, and these other 2 FODMAPs you're fine with, we then use that information to then expand a person's diet to get that maximum variety, but the minimum symptoms. The other thing that I always think of at that stage is that this is about how your gut nerves respond. And there are lots of, so FODMAP is almost like saying, oh, well, if we just produce less gas, we're not going to stimulate those nerves. But we can actually, if we get down to addressing the sensitivity of the nerve endings, and we can improve those nerve endings and teach them to be less sensitive, then we can expand your variety with food a lot more. So I almost feel like sometimes addressing the nerve endings is getting to the root cause, whereas a FODMAP diet is kind of like just putting a Band-Aid on it. So to me, a FODMAP diet is a holding pattern that we can use to get you comfortable fairly quickly, but it's what we're using in the meantime while we're working on your gut health and working on your gut-brain axis to hopefully in the long term get you even more room to move with food so that you're not having to restrict your diet at all, hopefully. That minimum restriction is what we want in the long term.
Wow, gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Well, that's really interesting. Like that, of course, now that I'm seeing the root cause is really just the sensitivity of those nerves and that gut-brain axis, the vagus nerve, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
And so I feel like, would I be right in saying the FODMAPs is kind of just a good platform for you to start on, just to, start getting used to, of course, the goal of it is just to kind of introspect and see what are the foods that are causing that instant discomfort, what are causing that instant gas and, pressure on those nerves. And then from there, when you know those 2.5 FODMAPs that are creating that discomfort, from there we can slowly start taking steps towards improving that vagus nerve, so that 2.5 starts becoming 2, then 1.5, then 1, then hopefully you start opening up that freedom to more foods that you enjoy. Is that kind of the storyline?
Well, look, that's a really good question, and the answer is yes and
Okay.
no.
It's not that idealistic.
So normally,
All the time.
well, there's more than one way to get from A to B, isn't there? So, and A is where you are right now, B is where you want to be. So, I always think when somebody first comes to see me as a patient, the first thing I'm thinking is, can we improve this person's symptoms without limiting their diet at all? Because the thing when it comes to IBS, yes, we know that sometimes or most of the time it's those oversensitive nerve endings. But when we've got gut transit is on a spectrum. Some people's gut naturally moves faster and some people's gut naturally moves slower. So one of the first things I'm thinking is this just a gut transit thing? That's best case scenario. It's an easy thing to address. Here we just need to slow their gut down a little bit. And it might be if somebody's gut transit is going very fast and they're getting a lot of loose, watery bowel movements, sometimes if we can target a soluble fiber and increase the soluble fiber goes in one end, passes through and comes out the other. And as it goes through, it acts like a sponge and it soaks up excess water. So if someone's getting lots of diarrhea, can we just put a soluble fiber supplement in, soak up some of that water and give them more form bowel movements? And does that resolve their issues? And if it's as simple as doing that, then we don't have to go down the elimination diet path. Is somebody just a bit constipated? If we can address constipation, does that then, because when you're constipated, you feel full, you feel bloated, you feel backed up, you feel gassy. If we can address the constipation, do all those other symptoms resolve at the same time? So often my initial steps are going to be about that basic healthy eating. Is your diet balanced? Are you overdoing something? Do we need to add a bit of fiber? Do we need to address the constipation? If we can do something like that and resolve your symptoms, awesome. Best case scenario. If that doesn't work, that's when I will sometimes often give people the option of, do you want to go down the elimination diet path? If we go down the elimination diet path, FODMAP is the most well-known option, but there are other diets as well. So certainly when we've got things like low histamine or food chemical sensitivity, these work in a little bit of a different way. You know, we absorb the histamines into our body, and if you've got a threshold for what you tolerate, when you go over that threshold, it stimulates the mast cells, and those mast cells release histamines, and you get a histamine response. And if you get a histamine response in your gut, you're going to get bloating, constipation, diarrhea, discomfort, cramping in your gut, and that will actually cause the nerves in the gut to be oversensitive. So in some people, if FODMAP doesn't work, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to screen someone, say, does this look like a FODMAP thing, or does this look more like a histamine thing? So that's when I'm going to suggest either a FODMAP diet or a histamine diet, or a whole food like wheat or dairy or something like that, to trial, does removing that improve your symptoms? And there are certainly situations where I see where it's the histamines increase the sensitivity of the nerve endings, and once we address that, the nerve endings come down and they become no longer so sensitive, and we can resolve it that way. We've also got things like gut-directed hypnotherapy, which and I've certainly had patients that have come to see me, and I say to them, look, let's do a course of gut hypnotherapy first before we play with your diet. And I've had people come back and say, hey, I'm 80% better after doing hypnotherapy, so I don't need to change my diet. I'm just going to keep listening to my hypnotherapy and life's great. So that's another option as well. So there's lots of different ways that we can go. Thing is about working out which way is the best way for you to go, what's likely to give you the best results. And then if we do end up down that elimination diet path, then working on that reintroduction process to get you more room to move. And then I've got a few tricks up my sleeve to address that gut-brain axis so that we can hopefully, the thing is about the gut-brain axis, and this is something that I probably see more often than I'd like in my practice, is that when people have got IBS, they know, around 90% of people with IBS know that food plays a role in their symptoms. And it's very common for people to dabble with removing foods and adding foods back to their diet. And in some situations that can snowball, and people can start feeling quite anxious around their food choices. And I see it particularly when people start keeping things like food and symptom diaries. A food and symptom diary will really reinforce that food symptom association. And we know IBS, yes, food plays a role, but it is never just about food. And sometimes your gut will play up, and it won't be because of food. It'll be because of hormones, or it'll be because you didn't sleep well last night, or there'll be stress in your life or something like that. So in that food symptom diaries, they forget that side. And I find that people find them getting quite frustrating, because when something else is playing a role in their IBS and they're going back through their diary looking for their food trigger and they can't find it, and it's not making sense and it's inconsistent. So they start to become anxious around food. And the thing is, when we become anxious around food's put down in front of you and you start thinking, oh, I don't know, should I eat it or shouldn't I? That sort of triggers your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response. And the thing is, when your body leans into that fight or flight mode, it reduces the blood supply to your gut, and it prioritizes blood supply to your heart and lungs, because it wants you to be able to run away or fight at any time. So if you've got less blood supply to your gut, you're not going to digest your food as well. It also decreases your stomach acid. It decreases your saliva as well. Your body wasn't designed to eat a sandwich while you run away from a tiger. So if you're in this situation where you've started making food symptoms associations, and then it's getting a bit frustrating and it's not making sense, and then you start getting a little bit anxious around food, that then exacerbates the symptoms, and then it starts to look like everything is triggering you. And that's when people end up in my office with a list of like 5 foods that they say, these are my 5 safe foods, and I can't eat outside of this. But even just eating those foods, their symptoms are not well managed either. And it's just because you don't digest food as well, but when you're on fight or flight, it actually increases the sensitivity of the nerves even more. So your body is going to be more responsive and on more high alert looking for these things. And it just, that sort of snowball roller coaster in those situations, we really have to sort of work on that groundwork first to work on reducing the anxiety around food choices, work on building that confidence before we can actually start seeing clearly what foods are problematic and what foods are not. Because once you sort of end up in that situation, nothing makes sense anymore, and it seems like every food is a problem. So, and that's I spend a lot of time I see a lot of that situation these days.
Like Joanna, I would imagine sometimes it could be very difficult. Just like someone walks through the door saying, Joanna, I need help. I have these foods that don't give me a reaction, but there's these that I can't eat. Basically, I just can't eat any other food besides these five. One thing is, of course, you have to look at every case in a unique way. And you have to kind of be like, all right, if they're stressed, I think that usually, because I'm trying to understand what your kind of process would be in figuring out what course or what healing method would come first, whether that's hypnotherapy, whether that's the FODMAP diet, whether that's the histamine diet. I feel like if they're more stressed, then you're like, all right, start with the hypnotherapy. You have to calm yourself down. You have to start optimizing the vagus nerve. And if still that doesn't work, then we're like, okay, now let's start thinking about a more elimination diet. Let's think about the FODMAPs. Let's see what exactly is the situation here. And then, of course, from there, it's either that or the histamine to see if it's the mast cells that are going to release gas. That makes a lot of sense. Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think when people first come to see me, probably the first 30 minutes of my consult, I just want to hear their story.
Right.
Because when they tell me their story, I learn a lot about what their symptoms are, and what symptoms they're getting related to food can give me a lot of hints around what potentially is the problem going on there. Because if someone is a histamine sensitivity, they might also get headaches or migraines, or they might get sinus congestion or skin flares or something like that. Whereas with FODMAPs, it's really just the gut that we're looking at. So if it's really just gut symptoms, that's given me some hints as well. But the way that people sort of tell me their stories and the way they talk about things gives me a lot of information about what sort of impact this is having on their life. Because ultimately, we're here to improve someone's quality of life. And if you're looking at something like an elimination diet, look, food restriction affects your quality of life. It's hard to eat out and it's hard to travel. And food is not just about nutrition. It's about socialization. It's about connection. It's about memories. It's about exploring other cultures. So limiting your diet affects your quality of life, and living with your symptoms affects your quality of life. So ultimately, we want to find the balance between these two that's going to give you the best quality of life. And you know what? No two guts are the same. We're all a little bit different. And what gives you the best quality of life is different to what's going to give me the best quality of life. So, sort of finding that balance is probably the hard part. And I always think when I'm working with someone, and look, this is something that sort of stems from my nursing as well, is that it's not my job to tell someone what they should be doing with their health. It's my job to give someone the information that they need so that they can make a choice about what they want to do with their health. So when we're talking about IBS, we're saying, okay, this is your situation, and these are all the things that are impacting on your IBS. These are your options going forward. These are the pros and cons of each option. That there's more ways than one way to get from A to B. Which way do you want to work through to get to where you want to go? And only you can decide where your balance is between food restriction and quality of life. I can't tell you where that is. I can help you work out what foods are going to do that and what foods are not going to do that. And I can sort of work with you on other things that are going to improve the vagus nerve and reduce the sensitivity of nerves in your gut and things like that. But ultimately, you're in charge. I'm really just holding the roadmap, and you're the one doing the driving. It's your body.
Right.
And I'm really firm believer in body autonomy.
That makes so much sense. Like that's it. So what's clear to me, Joanna, is what's the real needle mover in recovering from IBS and mostly all gut related issues. It's really just having someone who's got a roadmap and who can walk you through the small nuances and do the trial and error process with you. What I do find though is nowadays, and I feel like it might be one factor might be just our supplement space and like the mass marketing that we do like have coming our way. We sometimes we feel like the route to take outside of, this personal one-to-one interaction is just taking a supplement or taking something that says 50 billion CFU, it apparently having all the answers to our problems. I was wondering, like, what's your thoughts on that? And do you feel like there is a role in supplementation during this recovery process?
I think there is a role for supplementation. As a dietitian, I work from a food first perspective. So if we can meet your needs with food and we don't need a supplement to do that, brilliant. If not, there's absolutely a role. And you know what? If you could give me a pill and I could take a pill every day and it would mean that I could eat whatever I like and have zero gut symptoms, I'd be the first one
Sign
out
me
there
up.
taking it, right? Absolutely. I'd be a customer for life. Look, I think that's also, I think the balance between those two is where supplements play a role. So if there are certain things, like in some cases, probiotics can be a little bit hit and miss. Our gut microbiomes are all different and probiotics will behave differently in different people. But if there is a probiotic that settles well in your gut and it helps your symptoms and it gives you more room to move with food, absolutely there's a role for that. I use fiber supplementation quite a lot. And I also use things like magnesium citrate as another supplement that I use fairly regularly. I find that super helpful for constipation. So look, there's definitely a role. And then if we're going to the gut nerves again, there are some antidepressants that seem to target the nerves in the gut and help calm those nerves down as well. So I certainly have patients that sometimes a low dose antidepressant will be the best answer for them in terms of calming their gut nerves and calming their vagus nerve. And if that's, like I said, my job is to tell you what options are out there that are going to suit your situation, which ones you then get to choose which ones you want to use. And then I support you in whatever choice that you've made.
Right.
So yeah, definitely supplements play a role. And there are things that I take every day because they help my gut. Mm-hmm. So psyllium is
fiber.
The thing with fiber supplements, with some people, I'll get somebody who loves PHGG and they will swear by it and they will hate psyllium. I'll get somebody else that loves psyllium and hates K fiber, or someone else will love benefiber, or they'll love, and it's really just about working out which one sits well in your gut. Psyllium works well in my gut. Doesn't mean it's right for you, but certainly I take my psyllium supplements every single day because it helps keep my gut moving and it keeps my gut feeling good. And when my gut feels good, I feel good. And it gives me more room to move with food. And I want to get more variety with food. So I've taken the psyllium supplement, helps me do that. Awesome.
Right.
We'll do it.
I love it. And how does fiber play a role in the FODMAPs? Is that like, are there certain fibers that are high FODMAPs, like do you have to look out for, or is that like a different like league in it of its own? Is that something you have to account for?
Yeah, so that it's a low FODMAP diet. So we've got probiotics and we've got prebiotics. Probiotics are the live bacteria that we want to live in your gut. The prebiotics are the food for that bacteria. Right. The thing about prebiotics is that because they're the food for the bacteria, when they arrive in the gut, the bacteria feed on them and create gas as a side effect. And whether that prebiotic is high FODMAP or not is determined by how quickly that gas is created. So the thing about FODMAPs is that they are prebiotics and they are fibers that when they arrive in the gut, they get a lot of gas created very quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
So a lot of FODMAPs are fibers and a lot of FODMAPs are prebiotics. And on a low FODMAP diet, it is hard to meet your fiber needs. And like I said before, if it's a gut transit thing, sometimes fiber is the answer before a FODMAP. But then it's the type of fiber that makes the difference because we've got different types of fibers as well. There's soluble fibers, there's insoluble fibers, there's resistant starch, there's complex fibers, there's isolated fibers. So working out which one's going to make the difference for you. But we do find that I certainly know in Australia, and what I understand about the US as well, is that the vast majority of people actually do not meet their fiber needs, and that a low fiber diet can be an instigator for IBS as well. And then if you're not meeting your fiber needs and you start getting gut symptoms, and then you do a FODMAP diet and you start limiting your fiber even more, it's, I would say, one of the most common negative side effects that I see of a FODMAP diet is constipation. So I see, because the FODMAPs are drawing water into the gut, when you stop eating FODMAPs, your gut dries out. And a low FODMAP diet will reduce the bloating, but it would actually worsen the constipation in many cases. It's, yeah, so fiber is important. Fiber is important for nourishing that gut microbiome as well.
Gotcha. And earlier, Joanna, you were mentioning some tricks you had up your sleeve to kind of fine tune and optimize that the connection between the brain and the gut. If you could share a bit about that and kind of the role in the vagus nerve in general, because what I do hear a lot right now is, like, if you have anxiety, and I love, by the way, how you shared this idea of the fight or flight and how, blood, your body's like, all right, get the blood in the in the brain, in the heart, it's survival mode. But otherwise,
Yeah.
and what that does is it's withdrawing blood from your gut. I never thought about it like that. That's so eye-opening. Specifically, like, just the vagus nerve and the role in it. If you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's a whole topic. I could talk for hours about that. But essentially, if someone, what are we going to do to address the vagus nerve? So that's really where the hypnotherapy is probably one of our first line interventions. Hypnotherapy, it really targets those gut nerves, it targets that vagus nerve, and it teaches it to be less responsive, and it teaches those nerves to be a lot calmer, which is great. The other thing that's really beneficial about hypnotherapy is that it's very calming, and it helps switch your body out of that fight or flight mode. It switches on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest mode. And that's when your blood supply is going to your gut so that you can digest food better. And hypnotherapy is really beneficial for that. The other thing that I'm thinking about, and things like when we're addressing the vagus nerve and we're addressing that sort of the nervous system side of things, is that, again, the nervous system doesn't speak English. So sitting there and saying to someone, just calm down, just relax, you're just overthinking it, that the body doesn't understand that. The body understands actions and it understands feelings. So if we're wanting to target that vagus nerve, we're having to do it with actions. And some of the things that I'm thinking about is, or some of the things that tend to work, is things that you do when you're in a calm and relaxed state. Those are things that if you start doing them, your vagus nerves start saying, oh, are we in a safe place? Oh, we must be okay. I'm going to start calming down and I'm going to switch off that fight or flight. So it's about sort of working out what actions your body connects to. So, I mean, things like singing. You don't sing when you're in a dangerous situation. So when you start singing, your vagus nerve actually picks up on that and thinks, oh, okay, we must be safe, and it will often calm down. So that can be really beneficial. The other thing about fight or flight, and this is something that I think that we forget a lot of the time, is that when you're going into stress, or when your body's in a stress state, it's a process. And your body, there'll be a trigger, and then you'll sort of enter this stress tunnel, and your body will be prioritizing your lungs and your heart. It'll be diverting the blood supply it will be creating energy. And the thing is, if your body creates a whole lot of energy, you've actually then got to use that energy so that your body can come out of the other side of that fight or flight. And it's something that you see in dogs as well, when dogs, because your body doesn't know the difference between being stressed and being excited, it will actually treat them in the same way. And when dogs get excited, they run around mad, they get the zoomies. And that's because their body has switched on that fight or flight mode. It's created a whole lot of energy. Then they have to use that energy so that they can come out of that fight or flight mode as well. And look, we're human, but we're biological beings, and our bodies, you can't fight biology.
Right.
Our bodies are designed to work in a certain way. You can't trick your body. you've got to sort of get to know your body. You've got to work with your body. And if that means that going out for a run or going out for a walk to burn some of that energy can be really beneficial to calming that fight or flight response as well.
Right. That makes,
So yeah,
yeah,
action.
that makes that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And gratitude. Gratitude is amazing, it's and it can be as simple as sort of sitting down at the end of each day and making like 2 dot points of things that we're good about today. Doing that each day is just a little drop in the ocean, but over time that actually builds up and it changes the color of the whole ocean, and you start to notice the good in your day, and what you focus on you amplify. So if you're keeping a food and symptom diary and always focusing on your symptoms, you're going to amplify your symptoms. If you're keeping a gratitude diary and focusing on the things that are good in your day, you're going to amplify those good things. And amplifying those positive things, your body understands that, and your body thinks, oh, this is a good place to be, and it calms down that vagus nerve as well.
Wow. Joanna, as the more I'm learning from you, the more I'm realizing that it is really more about just the basics that we've heard all this time, which is it's so important to find your peace, be calm, and do things that really light you up. And I feel like one thing that I have been practicing a lot, especially during the pandemic, because it's given us so much time, is meditation. Just sitting in silence with your thoughts, with deep breaths, and I feel like that practice just in it of itself, it's helped me so much, not only in a tactical perspective, like being present, but also like in terms of my health. I feel like I'm way more obviously like the fitness and everything, that's exercise, that's a whole nother angle, but I feel way more energy, and I feel like I think there's like a vibrational aspect to it that maybe like it's just like I don't know how to say, like being calm and being in a zen state, it's like it gives you that ability to live life presently, and that affects everything else, right?
Yeah. It's mindfulness. It's about
Mindfulness.
living in the here and now and sort of recognizing where you are. And look, I think about when I think about gut hypnotherapy, it's not hypnotherapy like you see in a stage show where they
Right.
make you bark like a dog.
Right.
That's not what gut hypnotherapy is. Gut hypnotherapy is essentially, it's a meditation that's focusing on your gut. And we know from research that Monash, they had 75 people with medically diagnosed IBS, and they split them into 3 groups. And they put one group on a low FODMAP diet, and they put another group on hypnotherapy, and they didn't change their diet. But at that 6-week mark, both groups had equal improvement in their symptoms.
Wow.
And so the takeaway from that is that hypnotherapy is as effective as a low FODMAP diet for managing IBS. So the FODMAP diet reduces the GATs. The hypnotherapy addresses that gut-brain axis. So we know that it works. The research tells us. But the key is about finding what's going to work for you to improve that gut-brain axis and improve that. And then, yeah.
Gotcha.
It's, yeah.
Brilliant.
What does your body understand? What does your body connect with?
Right. Everyone is different in our own beautiful way.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it. And so just to learn a little bit more about it, the hypnotherapy. So is it just like a very sweet voice that's walking you through, like, is it like, are they telling you a story? Is it like a step-by-step where they're telling you to relax, calm your eyes? How does that, is it like an audiobook? Because I am actually new to it. I don't know much about hypnotherapy.
Oh, really?
I actually,
oh, wow.
But again, like all I've ever done in terms of being zen and present is, just sitting right here on my couch and trying to, just be calm. But I feel like hypnotherapy is also very effective, because it's just like, because sometimes I feel like some of my loved ones are always on the move, but what that does is you're in that fight or flight, and you're very anxious all the time. What exactly is that hypnotherapy? How does it look?
I love hypnotherapy, probably because I see so many people getting good results with it. There's a few different ways that you can access hypnotherapy. The study that Monash did, where they sort of put a group on the FODMAP diet and a group on hypnotherapy, the program that they used is actually available now in an app that you can download to your phone, and the app is called Nerva. And I recommend Nerva to a lot of my patients. The other option for hypnotherapy is that you can see a psychologist that has done extra training and gut-directed hypnotherapy, and they will develop a program specifically for you. Usually, if you're doing Nerva is a 6-week course, and it's 15 minutes per day. So each day you open up the app on your phone. There's a little 2-minute read, which drip feeds you little bits of information about the gut-brain axis and about IBS along the way. So you do your little 2-minute read, then you pop in your headphones, you shut your eyes, you lie back, and you listen to it. It starts off with about 5 minutes of sort of slow, deep breathing to get you into a relaxed state, because for hypnotherapy, we want you to be in a relaxed but focused state. So you know how if you're watching a movie, like a really good movie, and you get really engrossed in the movie, someone can come and talk to you and you don't even hear them. That's where we want you to be for hypnotherapy. Right. So the first sort of 5 minutes is about slow, deep breathing to get you into that really relaxed and focused state, because when you're in that state, your subconscious is open to suggestion.
Wow.
So what happens next is they tell you to imagine yourself doing things. So it might be, you might imagine yourself in this 18th century pharmacy, and it sort of talks about the feeling of the cold floor and what it looks like, and the little drawers and the herbs and things. And then there's a potion there with your name on it that's specifically for you. So you imagine yourself drinking it, and as you drink it, it sort of coats the insides of your digestive tract and protects them. There's other ones about there's a river, and you can move the stones around in the river to make it flow faster or make it flow slower. So it's using these sorts of analogies, telling you to imagine yourself doing things. And then at the end, it has about a few minutes of this sort of positive reinforcement. You're going to feel better, you're going to be well, those sorts of things. And that's a 15-minute thing. You then listen to it every day. The research tells us that most people around the 2 to 4 week period will start to notice a difference in their symptoms. And they say that peak improvement is around 6 weeks. If you're going to see a psychologist, usually the first session is going to be about getting to know you. After that, you go back, usually for sort of about 5 or 6 sessions, depending on the psychologist. And each session, you'll close your eyes and they will talk to you to do the hypnotherapy. It'll be similar, where it'll be deep breathing and imagery and then positive reinforcement. Usually they'll record the sessions and they'll give them to you to go and listen to at home. We know with hypnotherapy, what you put into it will be what you get out of it. So if you're doing it every day, you're going to get a lot more out of it than if you're doing it once a week. But we know that a minimum of once or twice a week is enough to see an improvement. So that like I said, I see people getting a range of different results from it. I absolutely have people come back and say, I'm 70, 80 or 90% better. I definitely see that. I get at the other end of the spectrum, I get people coming back and saying, well, it hasn't taken away my food sensitivity, but I'm definitely a lot less stressed about having symptoms. So the symptoms don't bother me so much. So I'm still glad that I did it, even though it didn't take away the food sensitivity. I've never had someone say that they regretted doing it. So worst case scenario, you become less stressed about having symptoms, which is a good thing. Best case scenario, all the symptoms go away. And I find that most people are sort of somewhere in the middle there.
Gotcha.
Sort of between those two.
You have created an amazing program called the Fast Freedom Program. I was wondering if you can share a bit about it. And is it something that, of course, it is one-on-one. Is it something that you can help people like remotely, like in America as well? Because that's where usually our listeners will be, and we would love to take help from you. Is it remote, and exactly what it entails? And I do hear that there are multiple weeks in any like intervention. How long is the course of like the whole training? How long does that last with a client? Like if we could get like a timeline as well on that.
Yeah. So first of all, I didn't create the Fast Freedom Program. I want to be clear about that up front. So Wendy Bussey, she's a registered dietitian in Canada. She created it. And it's a 6-week online group program. And I facilitate it.
Nice.
So essentially, the program It's a 6-week program, and I run it in small groups. So I'll take up to 10 people at one time. We actually, we just started a group today. So for the next 6 weeks, they'll be working through the program, and we do it in an online setting. We don't have any set times that you have to log in. That when you join the program, it's divided up into weeks. And the first week, so week 1, there is a list of strategies, and the strategies essentially that are based around improving the joy in your life, improving the calm in your life, and sort of targeting that gut-brain axis. So in that first week, you sort of read through all the strategies and you pick the strategy that resonates with you, and you start implementing that strategy for about 5 minutes each day. In week 2, there are 7 new strategies, and the strategies in week 2 are around addressing, a lot of them are based on, if you have IBS, a lot of people have developed behaviors to manage that IBS. And sometimes those behaviors are helpful and sometimes they're not. So that second week is around strategies that sort of addressing the behaviors that you've developed to manage your IBS and working out which behaviors are helpful and which ones are not. And it might be that you're someone who's an over-researcher, and every time you get a niggle in your gut, the first thing you do is jump online and you start Googling it. And more often than not, when you start researching, you find more horror stories, and then that sort of compounds and people start getting even more anxious about their symptoms. So one of the strategies is about, do we need to reduce the amount of research that you're doing? Other strategies might be around, if you've been keeping a food and symptom diary, do we need to stop doing a food and symptom diary and put a different strategy? Do we need a trusted food list and some scrap paper recording instead of a food and symptom diary, so that we're not amplifying your symptoms every day? So that week 2 is around those sort of behaviors and putting in new strategies that are actually going to improve your quality of life. In week 3, we continue with those strategies. We encourage people sort of 5 or 10 minutes each day, or just start fitting them into their daily life, and to sort of at the end of the week reflect a little bit on how these strategies, what the changes you're noticing, are they helpful, or something else going to be more helpful? Do you want to change strategies, or is this strategy working, or this strategy is in place, but actually the second strategy would really complement it, so do I want to bring that in? During this, we have a forum, which I moderate the forum. So I jump on each day, I answer any questions, people can share their stories, provide motivation, provide encouragement for people going through it. And then around week 4, we start thinking, well, with these strategies you've put in place, has that actually resulted in any natural changes with your diet? You know, have you found yourself just naturally eating more variety without thinking about it or not? And also in week 4, we start thinking, okay, are you then in a place where you are ready to start reintroducing some foods? Are you feeling calmer or more relaxed? And then we start sort of plan that reintroduction process and start implementing it in weeks 5 and 6. After week 6, we finish the course. People still have access to the content of the course. They still have access to the forum for about another 6 weeks after that, so they can continue to work on it. But what I'm finding from people who, quite a few of my patients have done the Fast Freedom program now, and what I'm finding is that the ones who have done it are a lot less stressed about the symptoms that they have, because they know that their symptoms are transient and they will pass. They have strategies in place. And I always think, you know, when you're learning to ski, the first thing you do is learn how to fall over and get back up again. And I think when you have IBS, one of the first things to learn how to do is how to manage your symptoms, so that when you do fall over, you've got strategies in place that can manage those symptoms. And I find that people who have done the Fast Freedom program have really got their head around that, and having that, knowing how to manage that, makes them then less stressed about having symptoms. And I find that they're people who they're then less anxious about doing a food reintroduction. And because they're less anxious about doing the reintroduction, their body's in rest or digest when they're doing it instead of fight or flight. So they're then more successful with their reintroduction. So I kind of see like the Fast Freedom as like the groundwork that gives you the skills that you need to reintroduce and expand your diet successfully.
Love it.
And I actually, look, I did it myself about a year ago
Hmm.
now, and I got a lot. I've been working in the space for 10 years now, and I got a lot out of
Wow.
it. And I had a really good handle on what was going on in my life, but I still got a lot out of it. And I think nearly everybody with IBS needs to do this
Hmm.
program as their groundwork. And then whatever else you do on top of that, this sort of gives you the foundations that are to build on.
I love it. I love it. Especially given that you've understood the ins and outs of IBS for so many decades, and still if it's giving you this much value, it's definitely something that all people with IBS or any gut related
For
issues
sure.
should definitely embrace. Thank you so much,
Yep.
Joanna, for all your precious time. Where can people find you and learn more about how you're facilitating this program, as well as everyday nutrition?
Yep. So my website is everydaynutrition.com.au. So you'll find all about me on there. The Fast Freedom program, there is a page on my website dedicated to the Fast Freedom program. So it talks about what's involved and how to register your interest in it if you're interested. The Fast Freedom program, that's open internationally, worldwide. Anybody can
Love
join
it.
that. Like I said, we started a group today. So if somebody, the next group, potentially around July,
Okay.
I will start the next
Right.
group. So, yep.
Awesome.
In terms of one-on-one, I do one-on-one consults. Unfortunately, because of the law in the USA at the moment, I can't see people one-on-one
Right.
in the
Yes. Okay.
USA. So US law states that the dietitian has to be in the same state, has to be registered in the state that the client
Oh,
is in.
okay.
So when I'm registered in Australia, so that doesn't help us in the US. However, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is the Gut Health Dietitian, or one word, all lowercase, no dots or anything, just the Gut Health
Right.
Dietitian. You can also find me on Facebook. On Facebook, it's Everyday Nutrition. I do have a TikTok channel, which is a very young, growing
I
thing.
love it.
And my TikTok is also the Gut Health Dietitian. So I actually need to I'm more of a taker than a giver on
Right.
TikTok. I spend a lot of time watching it. I need to actually put more effort into looking after my own TikTok channel, but that will happen. But I am
Joanna,
there.
I feel like maybe it's just the universe, but the people who usually are more givers than takers, at the end, they always win. So I'm sure, the TikTok, whether it's Facebook, people are gonna hear your message and you're really gonna change lives. I'm so, so grateful for all
Oh,
your time, for all your expertise, and just this opportunity of getting to know you. Um, any parting words, any key takeaways that you would love to share to the listeners?
Um, oh gosh, now you're putting me on the spot. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this chat. Um, look, ultimately, like I said, we want to improve someone's quality of
Yeah.
life. And we know that the best diet for anyone is the most liberal diet possible. So if we can sort of find that balance, yeah. I say, so my company tagline is resolve digestive issues and make peace with food.
I love it.
So that's what we want to do.
Enough said. That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Joanna,
Thank
for
you.
all your time. And we will absolutely drop in the comments exactly where to share, exactly where people can find you. And yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me.